Hi, this is Frank Warren and you're watching Lights Out.
This is Faisal Khan for Lights Out in association with Shamrock Boxing, and this is podcast 18 of the Lights Out Boxing podcast. And I'm delighted to be joined all the way from the YouTube channel known as Boxing Domination, the founder of Boxing Domination, Mr. Mohim Udin. Mohim, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing good, brother. Yourself?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for joining us today, man. Much appreciated you jumping on here, finally coming on one of our podcasts. And obviously, before we get started, we just want to remind the viewers out there, if they haven't already, please make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow us on all the social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. But what we'll be doing as well is we'll be sharing the Boxing Domination's Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter in the description, as well as their YouTube channel. So make sure you give their social media accounts and their YouTube channel a follow. Some very, very good content. I enjoy watching Mohim's usual updates on Instagram every day. It's good to get another channel on here. Obviously, it's quite difficult getting content right now for channels that are just sort of coming up in the game. So, which is why I really appreciate you jumping on. Obviously, let's just talk a bit about the Boxing Domination. Give us a bit of a lowdown about the Boxing Domination and where it's at right now.
So, shall I tell you how I started or the current situation?
Yeah. Go on. It's always good to hear another YouTuber's story.
So, I first started off when I was about 14 or 15.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was when I started doing polls on Twitter. At the time, I was the only person from the UK that was doing weekly polls on boxing for the 16 weight divisions in boxing.
Mm.
And then I started doing it for Ian Lewison first. And, as a 14, 15-year-old boy, when you get 200-300 votes on Twitter, you're like, wow, that's big numbers.
Mm.
So I did it for Ian Lewison. Then Dave Allen started retweeting it. Those started getting about 4,000 or 5,000 votes. So that was big numbers. And then I think Dave Allen fought Dillian Whyte. Then Okoli Chamberlain was happening. Chamberlain started getting behind it. I started doing it for the best boxing gyms in the UK. Spencer Fearon, Dave Caldwell, even Matchroom's Frank Smith even got involved as well in retweeting and sharing the page. So that's when I sort of had like a little buzz for like the boxing media. And then I created a YouTube channel, then a Instagram channel of Boxing Domination, hit 14,800 on Instagram, 21,500 on Facebook. Eventually it went down due to, some copyright issues and stuff like that, and some unknown reasons. But I sort of started doing interviews of like small hall boxers because I've been on some shows with you at York Hall, and I sort of like enjoy, sort of interviewing some boxers, well, pretty much all boxers, especially the small hall fighters who struggle to sell tickets. So that's the, our platform sort of come in help to sort of help them get sponsors, promoters, managers, and even get them confidence in front of the camera. Some can go off to becoming British champions. Some can go off to winning like a Southern Area title. So it's just a joy that, really comes, that's really the best part. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think one thing about our platforms is that me personally, don't get me wrong, I could sit down here all day and talk to someone like Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, but I also enjoy interviewing a fighter that's just had his first or second professional fight, just listening to their the early stages of their career and like their kind of story on the rise of boxing. So, which is why I've seen you many times at your call at Steve Goodwin shows, and I have to admit, every Steve Goodwin show I've been to, I've enjoyed quite a lot. And again, as you mentioned, you get the fighters that are at the early stages, and the majority of them, do struggle to sell tickets. But it's also good that we sort of give them that bit of exposure, and that way we're helping them, and they're also helping us. But no, listen, I appreciate you giving us the lowdown on the Boxing Domination, and once again to the viewers out there, we're going to be sharing the links for those social media platforms in the description. So get following the Boxing Domination on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and of course, make sure you subscribe to their YouTube channel. Mohim, what we do with every podcast, I know I've got to tell you what we do. Even though you've watched a few of our podcasts, is we move on now. We do a quick fire question, which is what we do with every podcast. And the quick fire question today is, if we could commentate on any boxing match from the past, which one would it be? I'm going to let you pick which fight you would love to rewind back maybe to yesterday, and choose which fight you would like to commentate on live.
Oh, you know, there's so many fights that I would love to do. Like, you know, I've got fights from small hall fights to sort of the big fights. I personally would want to do, and I know not many people would obviously, you know, sort of pick this, but I'll probably go for like a Joe Calzaghe versus Bernard Hopkins.
Okay.
Because that was something that was sort of entertaining for me, because obviously Calzaghe's from UK, and all that build up, you know, to, you know, the remarks that were made by Hopkins prior to the fight, leading up to after the fight. Obviously, that's something I would want to do, or, you know, that fight, or maybe the Mayweather Ricky Hatton. You know, I'll pick Mayweather versus Ricky Hatton instead, because that was more for that fight had more hype, in my opinion. So yeah.
I remember
So,
we did a podcast a few weeks ago, and the quick fire question: what was the best build up to a boxing fight? And Ron Mohsin Gulshare, who also features on our podcast, but the lazy fucker's just not available today. He's away on holiday with the family, so fair play to him. He also said that the best build up to a fight he's seen had to be Hatton versus Mayweather. The fight that I would choose to commentate on for me all day long is Arturo Gatti versus Mickey Ward, the first one. You know, the whole fight itself was just thrilling, entertaining, you know, back and forth. I think that 9th round I've watched, whichever channel I've watched it on YouTube has got so many views because I've watched it that many times. But I think the fight I would love to commentate on, because it was an all-out brawl and all-out slugfest, and it's probably going to go down as one of the greatest fights of all time, is Mickey Ward versus Arturo Gatti. Ward, Gatti, all three of them were brilliant, but that first one, round 9, definitely just takes your breath away. Well, obviously, we'll start the first topic this week. The conclusion of fight camp, week 4, the Matchroom fight camp, and it's the big one, probably the biggest fight since Wilder Fury, due to the obvious, you know, the whole COVID situation. We've been waiting for such a long time for that big fight to come round, and we're getting it. The body snatcher Dillian Whyte versus the highly experienced and former heavyweight champion of the world, Alexander Povetkin. Now, you know your boxing, you know what both fighters are all about. What type of a fight do you think we're getting on Saturday night?
To be honest, leading up to the fight, I was actually very excited. But right now, I've sort of got doubts, because obviously Dillian Whyte's made sudden changes in training camp. So right now he's training with Xavier Miller from IQ Boxing Gym, and he's got experienced cornermen such as Dave Calder, which he hired yesterday, or I think it was the day before, I believe. Please tell me if I'm wrong. But the changes of trainers, I don't think that's a good idea, in my opinion, personally, to replace Mark Tibbs prior to possibly the biggest fight of his career right now. You know, he wins this fight, and then he fights the winner of, I think Mauricio Sulaiman said he's going to fight the winner of the Fury Wilder fight. Yeah. So obviously, I think this fight is going to determine on sort of Whyte sort of coming into box. I don't think Whyte's going to come to take up Povetkin in the early rounds, but I think Whyte would be able to sort of catch him in between round 7 and 9. But again, Povetkin's not shown he's old yet. Even in the Michael Hunter fight, he's sort of come back every time he got caught. I personally don't really have a winner in this fight. I don't know who's going to win this fight exactly. But it should be an interesting one, because obviously we're going to be able to see if fatherhood really caught up with Povetkin. But yeah, I personally don't really have a winner in this fight. Like, you know, I'm going to go with pretty much whoever wins on the night. You know, I'd like to hear from you.
It's funny you say that about the changing coach with Xavier Miller coming in as well, and of course Dave Caldwell being added to the team. And I kind of remember before Wilder Fury 2 and the change from Ben Davison to Emmanuel Stewart, and I was thinking to myself, like, you know, if it ain't broke, why fix it? And I don't think Ben Davison done. I think Ben Davison done a terrific job with Tyson Fury. But you look at the change, and right now it's probably the best decision he's made, because I think what Emmanuel Stewart and Andy Lee did is they sort of pushed Tyson Fury away from being that defensive fighter to more of an attacking fighter. And the game plan that they put in that fight was spot on. They absolutely bullied Deontay Wilder in the rematch. In terms of Xavier Miller, I mean, he's been in boxing.
We don't really know much of him, do we? Like, we don't really know much of who his like of the top professionals he's trained, because I know he's got some very good prospects. He's got Dennis Mohim, Yusuf Kamaru, who's had a good fight against Liam Dillian, and Yusuf's a very good fighter too. He's got some very good fighters like Adrian Redmond as well at the IQ gym, but they're all prospects at this stage. You know, like Sugar Hills and Andy Lee. You know, Andy Lee was a former world champion, but you know, I'll let you talk. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, no, I like the point you just made there. Obviously, one of the other fighters as well that he's got is Luton's very own K Prosper, so he's got that experience. But I just think when it comes to like the world level scene, you know, that experience on the night, you know, is it you know, it's going to be interesting to see whether, you know, this move pays off. I don't think Mark Tibbs, you know, I think they should have seen it through with Mark Tibbs and then sort of assessed the situation on what to do next. I think Mark Tibbs done a tremendous job with Dillian Whyte. They've been together for a long time. But listen, you know, change in boxing is something that happens all the time. You know, fighters are always changing trainers. And I think if Dillian Whyte can see something in Xavier Miller that we haven't seen, then, you know, I'm all game for it. But it's an entertaining one. And then again, you know, you mentioned Povetkin, you know, the fight against, his last fight against Michael Hunter. I mean, the first 1-2 rounds watching that fight, you'd think that Michael Hunter was going to get rid of him quite early. But, I mean, as the fight went on, you know, yes, Povetkin's he's old, you know, his age is not his best friend at the moment, but he proved in the later rounds, in sort of the championship rounds, as people like to call them, that age is just a number in this game. But what really impresses me about Povetkin is every time he's fought, nobody's given him a chance now. I believe it was round 7, the knockout before Anthony Joshua knocked him out. I had Povetkin winning that fight on points. And I think Povetkin was very unlucky not to get the decision against Michael Hunter. When you look at Povetkin, what type of a fight do you think he brings to Dillian Whyte? And what chance do you give him of winning this fight?
I give, so at this stage, I give Povetkin quite a big chance of winning this fight because Povetkin is the underdog. Povetkin, he's sort of coming off you know, he's had a loss, then he's had a win, then he's had a draw. But Whyte's been on wins back-to-back. You know, Whyte's been on basically dogfights. He's been in with Chisora twice, Lucas Brown, Joseph Parker. I know he's former European champion, Oscar Rivas, Robert Helenius, which was a very one-sided fight, of course. But you know, he's had tough fights back-to-back. But how much tough fights can a fighter take in a row, if you know what I mean? And with Povetkin, I think Povetkin's got not much to lose, so he's going to really try and come out and give like his last shot, to be honest. Well, that's what I would presume. So I would give him a big puncher's chance to win this fight, personally.
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, there's a lot of pressure on Dillian Whyte going into this fight. You just mentioned, you know, Povetkin doesn't have really anything to lose. But every time we've been in this situation with Dillian Whyte, we looked at the Joseph Parker fight and we thought, well, you don't really need that fight. You know, you're practically, you know, the #1 mandatory for a world title shot. Why are you taking that fight? You took that fight and you come through it. The second fight with Chisora, you know, the Oscar Rivas fight. These fights were all like banana skins, and he's just come through it, which is why I really rate Dillian Whyte, because, you know, any other fighter in this position right now could turn around and say, well, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to take this risky fight, and I'm just going to wait for a world title. But with Dillian Whyte, he's taking these risky fights. You know, he's improving, you know, his boxing skills as he goes on. He's improving his record. He's making his money, and he's letting these, you know, the likes of the Furies and the Joshuas, the Wilders, he's not going anywhere. And I've said for a very long time that Dillian Whyte right now deserves a world title shot. You know, I mean, I don't, the situation with the WBC and Maurizio Sulaiman, you know, how he's been treated, it's a farce. And I do believe now with a win on Saturday night, he does get that world title shot. There's another point I wanted to make to you here, Mohim. What do you make of Anthony Joshua being in the commentating studio? And what do you make of Dillian Whyte's comment saying that if he tries anything funny, like comes into the ring, Dillian Whyte's just, you know, all hell could potentially break loose?
I mean, I remember Joshua. I don't exactly remember which fight it was.
The Chisora fight, the second one.
Yeah. So I think Joshua got booed off the ring from the crowd, didn't he? Because he said he was going to fight Dillian Whyte, but then he sort of started making enough excuses. Well, I don't know if he made excuses, but it sort of sounded like he sort of did. But obviously, Dillian Whyte, you know, he's a boxer that deserves a world title shot. It's been more than 2 years that he's been away with the WBC. And he's been in, just fights after fights after fights. When he should have actually got the title shot before Tyson Fury did. So obviously, I think it's a good idea, but at the same time, I don't, I would like to see something, but at the same time, I don't think Joshua would get in the ring personally. I think he will sort of be outside, and he'll be sort of kept a little away from Dillian.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously we'll go back to what you said about the last time they were in the ring. You can't. The words were like, who he kind of asked the fans who did they want to see him in the ring with next, and a lot of fans kind of cheered on the possibility of him fighting Dillian Whyte. But then he goes, "Listen, there's a way it works. Number one, number two, and then of course, if that doesn't happen, then." I mean, Dillian Whyte, he's been through a lot. I mean, the whole drug scandal of last year, which, a lot of people slandered him for, then it all came back that, he was in the all clear. So I think what Dillian Whyte is more or less saying is he doesn't want to be mugged off anymore. He's had everything thrown at him, yet he still stood tall. He's, every time you pay for a Dillian Whyte fight, I've always said that if there's one fighter out there that is pay-per-view worthy, that who you're going to spend £20 or 20, whatever it is Dillian Whyte, because I've never seen him in a boring fight. Yeah, the Hellenius fight was, but again, every time he's had a main event fight, it's always been entertaining, it's always been thrilling. But in terms of the Joshua thing, is the whole thing is all up in smoke right now. We don't know when Joshua's going to fight Pulev. We don't know what's going on with Wilder Fury 3. I mean, I honestly think that the Joshua Pulev fight will happen, but I don't see the Fury Wilder 3 fight happening. So I think Dillian Whyte's best route is to pursue the WBC title. But if you look at interviews with Sky Sports and other, media outlets this week, Dillian Whyte claims that Tyson Fury doesn't want to fight him.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I mentioned before, your boxing, you know what goes on in the sport right now. You follow all these fighters on social media, you watch the interviews, you read the articles. Would you say there's any truth in it that Tyson Fury does not want to fight Dillian Whyte?
No, I don't exactly see that because obviously Tyson Fury, I wouldn't say Tyson Fury is scared of any boxers, because you look at his comeback fights, his first 2 comeback fights, I think he fought, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it wrong, Safari
and Pianetta, yeah.
Yeah, Safari and then Pianetta, and then while being out of shape, he's jumped in the ring with Deontay Wilder. So I don't think he's afraid of the fight, but I think it's more of like a business move to fight. I think business-wise, making money-wise, that made more sense, because I know he's gone into WWE where he made, I think the numbers were around 10 or 15 million just to make appearance on WrestleMania. Then the Deontay Wilder fight, that's done, big numbers on pay-per-view in America and in the UK. So obviously, when it comes to that, I don't think he's scared, but I just think it's more of like a business move to make the fight with Wilder, because I know pay-per-view for the fight in America was $75. And even if 100,000 people buy it, that's 7.5 million in revenue. So I think business-wise, it makes more sense for the Wilder fight. But no, I don't think he's scared, no.
No, I agree with you. I respect Dillian Whyte a lot, because, like I said, he's a good fighter. He's pay-per-view worthy, and he's really improved since that defeat all the way back in 2015 to Anthony Joshua. But I'm a big Tyson Fury fan. I wouldn't really say that Tyson Fury's scared of Dillian Whyte, but I do feel as if that third fight with Wilder is not going to happen, and Dillian Whyte can come through Povetkin on Saturday, I think there should be no excuses. I think that's what the WBC, Tyson Fury and Dillian Whyte should be doing next. Even possibly before the end of the year. Tyson Fury fought all the way back in February, and this is Dillian Whyte's first fight of the year. So, these fighters currently fight 2-3 times a year, if that. So, listen, Whyte wins tomorrow night. Wilder doesn't come through this injury. I think the next fight should be Whyte versus Tyson Fury. We all want to see the Anthony Joshua fight with Tyson Fury, but you also want to see the man that who's worked his socks off, who's beaten some of the best opponents in this division, who's had everything thrown at him, get what he deserves, which is a world title shot, whether it's with the WBC route or whether it's with Anthony Joshua's belts. As we do with every podcast, when we talk about a fight preview, let's make a prediction. I'm going to go for a 10th round knockout victory for Dillian Whyte. But I'm going to give credit where it's due. I think Alexander Povetkin gives him a horrible night in the ring. But I do see Dillian Whyte coming through with a 10th round knockout victory.
I mean, obviously, with me, I'm not going to go for Povetkin because exactly, we see Dillian Whyte's fights, obviously, in the past. He's always overcome the tough fights. The tough night over Oscar Rivas, I believe he went down as well that night.
Yeah.
He went down on the 12th round of the Joseph Parker fight. So, and he's had 2 massive wars with Derek Chisora. So I'm not going to count any of the fighters out. But if I was to go for a knockout or decision win, I would say it will probably be a late stoppage, maybe again in between round 9 and round 12. So I'll probably go for a round. I can't say exactly what round, but I think it'll be in between round 9 and round 12. Possibly a decision win for Dillian Whyte. That's what I think personally. A decision win.
It's going to be a good fight, and it's a good card as well. I mean, you've got Zach Chelly fighting Cullen on that card. You've got Clay versus Congo, and you've got Alan Babbage as well. Looks like one of the next big things in the heavyweight division. But another fight on that card is the highly anticipated rematch between Katie Taylor versus Delfine Persoon for the undisputed lightweight females women's title. That's a big fight. I don't know about whether you've seen the first one.
I've seen the first one. I have, yeah.
What was your thoughts on that first fight? The fight itself and the decision.
Right now the boxing in the women's division right now is buzzing right now. We've had 3 back-to-back, fiery fights in the last, just over a month or so. But in the first fight, if I was to be honest, as much as I like Katie Taylor, as much as I think she's done great for boxing, I had Delfine Persoon actually win the first fight. That's just the way I saw it, because I've seen the fight first time, obviously with the audio, and after that I've still watched it without the audio, and I still had Delfine Persoon win the fight. Because obviously when you watch a fight without the commentary, it's a lot different. So I've obviously watched it without that. I've watched the fight several times, and I still have Delfine Persoon still winning the fight. So what about you?
Well, do you know what? I'm going to obviously go back to your point where you said about women's boxing. It's on a massive high at the moment, and you've got to give Katie Taylor a lot of credit for that. I mean, since she turned over to the pros, she's done wonders for women's boxing. Rachel Ball, Shannon Courtenay, I think it was last week, was again another great fight. There's so many good fighters in the women's scene right now. But when you talk about this fight, you obviously have to talk about the first fight. Now, it was on the big card. Joshua Ruiz won. Joshua's debut in America. You sort of thought that would take all the limelight. But this fight for me, it might sound a bit controversial, but this fight for me, I had it as fight of the night, regardless of what happened with Joshua Ruiz. I thought this fight was brilliant. As for the decision, I watched the fight twice. I actually watched the fight last night again, and I had Delfine Persoon winning it by 2 rounds. Now, on here, what I asked whoever joins our podcast, I'd ask everyone to be open and honest, to not hold anything in. And again, a lot of respect for Katie Taylor, respect for what she's done for women's boxing, but I think her name itself won that fight. I mean, I thought, looking at the bill, women's undisputed title was on the line. I think the name of Katie Taylor, what she's achieved in the past, won her that fight. And I don't mean no disrespect or anything, but I thought, because Katie Taylor, she's got a big following on social media. She's worked wonders for Ireland and everything. I just think the name itself won that fight. And I think it was a very, very harsh decision on Delfine Persoon. But the first fight, I realised a lot of things about Delfine Persoon. She's a come-forward fighter. She likes to fight on the front foot, and she puts on a lot of pressure, and she's got one hell of an engine. Now, if you're looking at the first fight, what adjustments do you make going into the second fight if you're in the Katie Taylor corner right now?
So in the Katie Taylor corner, so obviously in the first fight, the sort of thing what I saw was in the first half of the fight, from what I saw was she was walking into the punches a lot. Obviously with Delfine Persoon, she's very rangy. She's had more fights. I think she's had more than 40 fights also, or more than 30 fights, I think. She's had a lot of fights. She's had more than the double amount of fights as Katie Taylor. I don't exactly know how many fights she's had, but she's only had 1 loss before the Katie Taylor fight. So obviously you know, the experience-wise in the pro game, she had more. She's been distanced more times as well. So I think what Katie needs to avoid is sort of in the first few rounds, sort of. I think last time around she's had a very slow start. That's the way I saw it personally. She's had a very slow start, and she only started to win rounds properly was in the mid rounds, because the first few rounds I sort of gave it away to Delfine Persoon. I don't know if you saw it the same way, but that's the way I saw it when I sort of watched it live. So I think she needs to be she needs to work the body a bit more personally. I think Thing is a little taller. But Thing is obviously rangy as well. So obviously when we look back at the fight that happened sort of last week with Rachel Ball and Shannon Courtney, Shannon, obviously I know this fight's a little different to that fight, but Rachel was the more experienced fighter in the pro because she was a kickboxing champion. I don't know if Delfine was part of kickboxing. I don't know if she was. She may have been, but I personally don't know. But obviously that's something that needs to be avoided. So that's the way I see it.
I think Katie Taylor this time should be the come forward fighter in this fight. I think she's got to apply the pressure to Delfine Persoon, and like I mentioned as well, the engine of Delfine Persoon is just on another level. But obviously that was a year ago. So I think Katie Taylor needs to be super mega fit for this fight, and I think she needs to realise that this is going to be. I think it'll go to a points decision. Like I said, I like Katie Taylor a lot. I respect what she's done for boxing, but I do think the name itself just got that decision that night. When you talk about that decision, I mean, I remember after the fight, Matthew Macklin and Paulie Malignaggi, they all said they had Persoon up by 1 or 2 rounds. Adam Smith had Delfine Persoon up by 1 or 2 rounds. I don't think there'll be a controversial decision this time. If it's the kind of same performance as it was in the first fight, I think Delfine Persoon will take it. This is why I think Katie Taylor needs to be the one that applies the pressure more. I don't think she wants to be chasing the second half of the fight. I think she needs to dominate from the start to the finish. And I really, really do. My advice to her would be is come forward, put the pressure on, try and attack Persoon a little bit more than he did in that first fight, because we've seen with Delfine Persoon, she dominated the mid stages of the fight and she probably took those last few rounds, which is why, again, a lot of people had her winning that fight. But again, we'll have to just got to ask the question before we do come to a prediction. Who's under more pressure in this fight?
I think under more pressure is Katie Taylor, because obviously usually with the home fighters, they're usually more under pressure. Katie's obviously she was an Olympic gold medalist. I don't know if she's won it twice or once. I know she was Olympic gold medalist. She's the undisputed unified champion, and she's currently ranked, well, when she became the undisputed champion, she got ranked as the greatest women's boxer of all time, even though Cecilia Brækhus was obviously undisputed champion for, I think, 6 or 7 years. So I think there's more pressure on Katie Taylor, but this is a fight that Thing cannot, sort of get out of hand if Delfine Persoon, because if she wins this fight, she sets up a trilogy. And the trilogy not only changes her life, but, gets more money, she becomes a champion, and she sort of becomes a national hero in Belgium.
Yeah.
So there's definitely more pressure under Katie in pretty much all stages.
It is definitely a fight I'm looking forward to, because obviously I hope it's as good as the first fight. Prediction time, Mohim. I'm gonna go for Delfine Persoon on points.
That's what I personally thought as well. I don't think there will be a stoppage in this fight, because none of the fighters really have that one punch power. They're both more of boxers. They both have knockouts in their resume. But with me, if I was to go for it, I think it will be like a points decision for Delfine Persoon. I think it will be a very close fight. Delfine might win by 1 or 2 rounds again, but I think it'll be a very close fight. So yeah.
Again, it's another fascinating card. We've not even mentioned the Mick Hennessy show on Channel 5 Live for the British light heavyweight title between Shaq and Peters and Chad Sugden. It's going to be a great night of boxing tomorrow. I'm going to have to have my TV on one side. I'm going to have my laptop on the other side just to keep up to date with both of the shows. Final topic. DAZN won't approve of Avni Yildrim as Canelo's next opponent. Now, the bout had been ordered by the WBC for the vacant super middleweight title, which was held by David Benavidez, stripped of the title for not making weight. Canelo's been in a bit of a conundrum the last couple of months. He's been trying to look for an opponent now. We all believed it'd be Billy Joe Saunders at one point. Then we seen that the fight was going to be offered to Callum Smith for $4 to $6 million. Now it's turned out that Canelo's next opponent is going to be Avni Yildrim. Now, I just want to make a few points about DAZN. Now, the face of boxing right now is between three people. It's between Canelo, Fury, and Joshua. Canelo is probably one of the biggest faces in boxing. A lot of people have nicknamed him the cash cow of boxing. Now, he's held world titles at super welterweight, middleweight, super middleweight, and the light heavyweight division. He really is probably the face of boxing right now, and he's probably the best fighter in the world. He's probably the pound-for-pound king right now. When you look at what we've gone through the last few months with this whole pandemic, coronavirus situation, and because currently all shows are taking place behind closed doors without the fans, does this make sense that we've had to wait so long for a Canelo fight that the next opponent is Avni Yildrim?
I mean, I've sort of seen the. Wait, can you ask me the thing again? I kind of.
Do you think, like, because of what we've been going through and everything, and because of where Canelo is right now in boxing, do you think that it's fair that Avni Yildrim is going to be Canelo's next opponent?
No, I don't think so, because when we you've watched the Yildrim versus Eubank in the World Boxing Super Series, right?
I have, yes.
Like, Eubank was able to get rid of Avni Yildrim comfortably, in 3 rounds. And there was actually a tweet that came up. I don't know exactly who the person was, but I sort of liked it on Twitter. Apparently, it was Canelo Alvarez who requested for the fight with Avni Yildrim. But there's so many fights that are out there that makes more sense. John Ryder fight makes the most sense, in my opinion, right now. Because I know John Ryder, he's had like a controversial, he's had a very controversial defeat against Callum Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Callum Smith is a fight that makes sense as well. I'll rather see any other fights rather than Avni Yildrim, because I just don't think it's a competitive fight. And it definitely won't do the numbers on DAZN. So no way.
I can understand why DAZN won't approve of this fight, because they pumped a lot of money into Canelo. They do believe he is the face of boxing, golden boy DAZN. It's a no-brainer, really. Canelo is one of the biggest stars in boxing right now. And as I said about the decision of Katie Taylor with Delfine Persoon, the first fight, I'm going to say it on this. It's an absolute farce that Yildrim's the next man to challenge for Canelo, who right now is recognized as the pound-for-pound king. When you've got so many good options out there, you've got a third fight with Triple G, you've got a potential big a unification clash with Callum Smith. There's that fight with Billy Joe Saunders. There's Benavidez. There's Caleb Plant. You can carry on. Even Chris Eubank Jr. for me is an exciting fight, because one thing you'd see with Eubank Jr. is he'd come forward and he'd try to look to take Canelo out. Don't think he'd have much luck in that department, but still, it's an exciting fight. Avni Yildrim, again, as you mentioned, Eubank Jr. walked through him. I expect Canelo to do the same thing that he did with Rocky Fielding with Avni Yildrim. I think whoever is to fight Canelo next, whether it's going to be an Avni Yildrim or whoever it's going to be, it's got to be a credible opponent. And I personally would like to see someone like a Callum Smith or a Billy Joe Saunders in the ring with Canelo next.
Yes, definitely. As being the face of boxing right now, he has to sort of fight the best of the best, and sort of, with the contract he's got with DAZN, he has to fight the guys that would get the biggest numbers for the company. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the Daniel Jacobs fight was really good, and he's obviously, there's so many fights, that he can go for. There's Dimitri Bivol, who's willing to go down to super middleweight to fight Canelo, so I think that's a good option as well. And I don't think Bivol is going to be much of a tough test at super middleweight, because we don't know exactly what he can do at super middleweight, because he's obviously only boxed at light heavy. So I'll obviously anyone other than Avni Yildrim. So
I mean, again, as you mentioned, Bivol's another good fight. I see Baturbiev say something on Twitter that he'd also be interested in the fight. That's the kind of the kind of pull that Canelo has. He attracts all the big names from middleweight to even light heavyweight. Even you got a few super welterweights. I've heard the Charlos have also called out Canelo in the past as well. Listen, I mean, again, I respect what Canelo's done in boxing right now. I respect his achievements, his accomplishments, and the kind of the big face that he's turned into. But because of what we've gone through lately with this, again, with the whole pandemic situation, You know, we're finally getting boxing back at a level where it needs to be. You know, you've seen how good fight camp has been. Every fight's been a good 50-50 fight. Tomorrow you're going to get at least 3 or 4 good 50-50 fights as well. You know, you've got the Santa Cruz and Tank Davis fight coming up soon. This one is not a 50-50 fight. I think this is a fight that Canelo ends the fight when he wants to end the fight. And again, it's just, I don't think it's good for boxing. I can understand why DAZN won't approve of Yildrim as the next opponent. The question I have to ask you is you said John Ryder, but a lot of fans will look away from John Ryder. So apart from John Ryder, who else would you like to see Canelo take on next?
I'll personally like to see Callum Smith, but I know why DAZN would like Callum Smith, because obviously I've heard from a lot of sources where DAZN wants to launch in the UK. So obviously, if they were to launch in the UK, I think a fighter like Callum Smith, who's got titles as well, makes the most sense, if you know what I mean. So I think business-wise, Callum Smith makes more sense than obviously John and Avni Yildrim.
Well,
and even Chris Eubank as well.
Well, like I said, Eubank would come forward. I don't think he'd have much luck, but he'd look to take. Look, I mean, regardless of what you say about Eubank Jr., I mean, yeah, there's a lot of bad points about him, but he's not a boring fighter. He does think he can knock anyone and everyone out. So again, Eubank Jr. versus Canelo all day long, rather than Avni Yildrim. That's no disrespect to Avni Yildrim, but it's just a total one-sided beatdown. I don't even think he goes beyond 2 rounds. But again, boxing is a sport where one punch can decide everything. So let's wait and see what happens. Right. That's all we've got time for on podcast 18 of the Lights Out Boxing podcast. I again just want to remind the viewers out there, if they haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. But also check out the description below and make sure you hit that subscribe button for the Boxing Domination YouTube channel, and make sure you also follow them on social media. We will be sharing their links below. Mohim, massive pleasure on you joining us. We hope this is the first of many. Listen, it's a pleasure having you on here. Before we go, is there anything you'd like to add?
I mean, I've done obviously, this was obviously, like a podcast that I've really enjoyed. This was the first podcast that I've done in 2020. And yeah, just thank you for sort of getting me on. I got a last minute call, which was quite exciting to jump on, talk to someone.
When he says last minute, he means last night. But no, listen, we're definitely going to be having you on here more, and we hope to be doing some work with you as well. But again, to the viewers out there, check out those links in the description, and make sure you follow Boxing Domination on all the social media platforms. Right, that's all we've got time for podcast 18. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to speaking to you guys next time. But that's all we've got time for on podcast 18 of the Lights Out Boxing podcast.